Hello guys, welcome you all. This is Shakti Academy. Please like our video and share if you like. Don't forget to subscribe our channel. Press bell symbol so that you could get updated videos of our channel. Right? Our next thing is about the hoe and plow. So you know that hoe is one of the tool which was used by the Farias for ploughing the land, right? So this topic is about the two tribal people who were living in the hills of Mahal, where it's located in Jharkhand, right? And this is from this we are going to discuss about that wetlands of Bengal through the drier zones, right? Which means the wetlands, the place of agricultural, and the drier lands, the same also for using for agriculture, and how the people shifting from the wetlands to drier zones. And this is about the settled cultivation as well as the shifting cultivation, which was practiced by both Farias as well as the Santals, right? So you know that in the hills of Rajmahal in the early 19th century, Bashan traveled through the Rajmahal hills. So here Bashan is a physician who came from England to do a medical service in Bengal, right? So he's a Bashan. He's a traveler who visited through Rajmahal hills. From his description, his hills appeared impenetrable, a zone of few travelers ventured, and an area that signified a danger. So previously we discussed that he visited Bengal. He visited Bengal through the Rajmahal hill. So that time his description, I mean his account is telling about the Raj Mahal hills is nothing but the people. I mean the Paharias people were the group of tribals, and who is looking like rude, as well as they are getting fear of by seeing the white peoples, right? Wherever he went, people were hostile, apprehensive of officials, and unwilling to talk to them. So whoever it may be, any white people, if any people enter the forest, they will hostile as well as they will apprehensive, and they are not willing to talk to them. So instead they will run into the forest and they will hide themselves, right? So here, who were these hill folk, and why were they so apprehensive of Bashan's visit? So here the question is, who were these people, and why they want to get a fear, as well as why they want to hide themselves when whites enter the forest? That we are going to discuss in this chapter, I mean topic, right? So his journal was written as a diary, a place we visited, people he encountered, and the practice he saw. So in the account of Bashan, he has written the book account as a diary, but he did not write anything fully about the places, but he had encountered only the place he had visited, and there people had practiced their cultures and etc. And it raises the question in our mind that sometimes it will raise the question in our mind why he had mentioned only few things about the city like this, but he did not write complete history about the people as well as the places, but he had mentioned only the few things about the places while he was visiting the people and as well as the places. And if you look at late 18th century revenue records, we learn of these hill folk are known as Paharias. Not on that. So according to the lands records, I mean the revenue record of late 18th century, we could find that these hill folks are known as Paharias. I mean the group of tribals Paharias who were living in the Rajmahal hills and subsisting the forest produce and practicing shifting cultivation. You know that what is shifting cultivation? Previously we studied, in the 6th, 7th itself we have studied the shifting cultivation. The places they will clear the forest, and they will burn the clearance, and from that they will get ashes. So again they will do agriculture in this. Once they cultivated the crops, again they will left the land, and again they will move to another place. There they will again cut off the trees, and again they will clear the forest, and they will do agriculture. So this is for shifting cultivation. So the same thing, these Paharias were living in the Rajmahal hills, and they produced forest things as well as the pasture items and the cattle rearings, and they practiced shifting cultivation, and they cleared the patches of the forest by cutting bushes and burning the undergrowth. On these patches enriched by the potash from the ash. So here, why these people are cutting down the trees, and they are burning it is nothing but through the burning they will get the potash is a mineral, okay, potash from the ash. The Farias grew variety of pulses and millets for consumption. So they grew plenty of, I mean a variety of pulses and they grew millets for consumption. And they scattered the ground lightly in the hope cultivated cleared the lands for a few years. Then they left to eat a fellow, and that's so it could recover the fertility and move to new area. So once they clear the forest, they will burn it off, and after the burn with the potash, they will do agriculture, and once the crop cultivated, they will left the land, left the fallow land. And why they are leaving the land is nothing but the land wanted to recovery for the next fertility, so that's what they are leaving it, and again they are moving to some other land for new agriculture things, right? So this is called a shifting cultivation. From the forest they collected mauha. Mauha is one of the flower, okay, which used for food, right? So they collected mauha and for food, and the silk cocoons, and the resin for sale, and the wood for charcoal production and etc. Right? You know charcoal. If you burn the wood, then from that they will get charcoal, right? So these are the things they were collected from the forest. The undergrowth that they speak like the mat, spread like a mat below the tree, and the patches of the grasses that cover the lands left fellow provided pressure pasture of our cattle. So after that they used to mat below the trees as well as the patches for cover the lands. And these people, as I told you, know, the big trees they used to cut off, the small bushes and the thorny bushes and the small grasses they used to give it for the cattle for rearing, right? Then the life of the Farias, you know that the life of the Farias, most probably these Farias may be the hunters and the shifting cultivators and the food gatherers and the charcoal producers and the silkworm rearers, was thus intimately connected to the forest. So these people, I mean their occupation and their livelihood, everything is closely connected to the forest, and they lived in the hutments within the tamarind groves, and they rested in the shade of mango trees. Initially these people used to live in the hutments, like inside the trees, I mean a big groves, as the big trees are there, no? So in that the grove will be there inside the tree. So they used to live there, and remaining people, some people used to live in the grove and some people used to live in the rest of the shade of mango trees. And they considered the entire region as their land in the basis of their identity as well as survival, and they resisted the intrusion of outside. So these Pagarias thought that entire land, I mean the entire hills of Raj Mahal were there under their control, and they never allow any outsider to enter the forest. Their chief maintained the unity of the group, settled the disputes, and led the tribe battles with the tribe and plains people. So here Pagarias people have a chief, right? Pagarias people have one chief. So this chief will maintain the group, and he is responsible for anything like newly happen, and for implementing the new laws for their groups and other thing, and collecting the customs for allowing the outsiders and etc. So within their base in the hills, the Pagarias regularly raided the plains where settled agriculturists still lived, and these raids were necessary for survival, and particularly in the years of scarcity, they were a way of asserting power and settled communities, and they were a means of negotiating political relationship with the outsiders. So sometimes they used to raid. Pagarias used to raid with the plain people. Used to raid to the plains where the settled agriculturists used to live. From there, they will steal some grains and other necessary things, right? So sometimes they have a negotiate with political relations with outsiders, like they have a close connection with the zamindars. Why they have a close connection with the zamindars? Sometimes the zamindars as well as the traders want to pass the Raj Mahal hill if they purchase anything goods or etc. So previously, as I told you, that nobody is allowed to enter the forest, but here zamindars as well as the traders want to pay the toll fee amount to the chief of Pagarias. Once it paid, and they are the security for, Pagarias were the security for their goods, and their goods will not be plundered by any others, right? So here, traders similarly gave a small amount to the hill folk for permission to use passes the controlled by them. So initially, these traders, whoever wants to cross the whoever wants to cross the Rajmahal hills, they want to pay the taxes to them. So once the toll was paid, and Paharia chief protected the traders, and they ensured that the goods of traders will not be plundered by any other thief or etc. So this negotiation pace was somewhat fragile, with the broke down in the last decades of 18th century, when the frontiers of settled agriculture were being aggressively extended in eastern India. So that time what happened? When the settled agriculture, when the government, when the company, encouraged the settled agriculture in the late decades of 18th century, and these pagarias are started to go away from the forest, and here problems had happened between these British people as well as these pagarias. The British encouraged the forest clearance. The Zamindars and the Jodidas turned cultivated lands into the rice field. So here, as I told you that previously these paharias were actually they were a shifting cultivator. So some places in the Rajmahal hills were being cultivated by them, and it left as a fellow land for the next fertility, right? So these lands were occupied by the Zamindars and the Jodidas, and they started cultivating the rice, right? So to British, extension of the settled agriculture was necessary to enlarge the resource of the land revenue, produce crops for export, and establish the basis of settled orderly society. So here actually British wanted to expand their land revenue, so that they started, they encourage the people to clear the forest and do the agriculture. So these agriculture crops and the cultivated grains is not only for India but also to export to some other countries, right? So that's what they wanted, more revenue, as well as they wanted to export the goods to other countries. So they encouraged clearing the forest, and they also associated forests with the wildness, and the forest, and saw forest people as a savage, unruly, primitive, and difficult to govern. So the first thing is they gave a permission to clear the forest, and the next thing is British people thought that these people, those who were living in the forest, they were unruly, primitive, and it's very difficult to handle them and everything. So finally they felt that forest had to be cleared and settled agriculture established. So finally they gave permission to Zamindars and Jodidas to clear the forest and to do the agriculture, and the forest people tamed civilized and pursued to give up them hunting and take to the of agriculture. So some of the people, those who were living alone in the forest, were being found by the British people, and these people were tamed to civilize the ploughing the lands. Instead they want to give up their profession like hunting, gathering, collecting food, etc. So as settled agriculture expanded, the area under forest and the pasture contracted. This shaped the conflict between the hill folk and settled cultivator. The farmer began to raid settled villages with increasing regularity, carrying away food, grains, and the cattle, and exasperated colonial officials tried desperately to control the subdue of pagarias, but they found the task difficult. So sometimes these zamindars and the pagarias used to ride to the places where pagarias were living, but it's very difficult to ride them, because previously what this British described about the pagaria is nothing but the people, those who are living in the forest, they were unruly, primitive, and it's very difficult to handle them. So that's what they found this task was very difficult. So in 1770s, the British embarked on a brutal policy of extermination, hunting the Hagarias down and killing them. So these people are not to obey the orders. These Pagarias did not obey the orders of British as well as the company rule. So they did not cooperate to any others because they are thinking that they were the survivor as well as the controller of all the Rajmahal hills. So in 1770, the British planned that to kill all the Paharias, those who are living in the Rajmahal hill. But unfortunately, in 1780s, Augustus Cleveland. So here Augustus Cleveland is the collector of Bahalpur, right? So he proposed a policy of pacification, to make a favorable of the Paharias, and he had a speak with them. Here Augustus Cleveland had a speak with them, and finally they became favorable to the government. Then proposed a policy of pacification. Pagaria chief were given an annual allowances and made responsible for the proper conduct for their men. So here what the pacification is telling, I mean what this negotiations pacification is telling about that. Here Pagaria chief, previously we discussed that Pagaria group had one chief, no, so he is responsible for everything like a leader. So here the discussion had made with the Pagaria's chief, and here Pagaria chief want to pay the annual allowances to the government, and once he paid, then he could access all the places in the Rajmahal hills, but they were expected to maintain order in their locality and the discipline their own people. So these as well as if you want to pay and you want to maintain the rules and regulations, as well as you want to make sure that your people should be in the discipline if anybody enter the forest, right? So many Pagaria chief refused the allowances, but who accepted, they will be the most often lost authority within the community. So most of the Pagarias refused to accept the condition by the Augustus Cleveland, but in some Pagarias were accepted, some group of Pagarias were accepted. So whoever accepted the condition of Augustus Cleveland, then they will be keep away from their community, as well as they lost their authority from their community. Being in the pay of a colonial government, they came to perceive the subsidiary employees and stipendiary of chief. So whoever has been lost their authority within the community, and they became the chief of their Pagarias, as well as they got some stipendiary amount from the government. As a pacification campaign continued, the Pagarias withdrew deep into the mountains, insulting themselves for hostile forces and carrying on the war of the outside. So here, as the pacification, these Pagarias chief did not accept the rules of the company and as well as Augustus Cleveland. So they started taking war against the outsiders, and they refused to go inside the forest for collecting the things and etc. So when Bashan traveled through the region in the winter of 1810 to 11, the Pagarias naturally viewed him with a suspicion and distrust. So in the beginning itself we discussed that when Bashan traveled through this village, Rajmahal hills, the people were very aggressive and they started running and hiding themselves. No, so these were the reason, right? So these were the reason why the people were naturally viewed, and they thought the white people were the suspicious, and they came for destroying the Pagarias. So the experience of a pacification campaign and the memories of a brutal repression shaped their perception of a British infiltration into the area. Then every white appeared to represent the power, destroying the ways, the means of survival, snatching away the control over their forest and land. So after that, their experience of the pacification among these Pagarias, what they thought that they started to see each and every white peoples as the destroyer of their life and their survival and their community. So if any people enter the village, definitely they will snatch something away from their control of the forest and lands. So by this time, in fact, there were a newer intimation of a danger. So at the same time, the new danger has been arrived at. That's nothing but the tribal of Santals, right? So these Santals were pouring into the area, clearing the forest, cutting down the timber and ploughing the land and growing the rice, cotton. So immediately these Santals were started entering, middle lower hills of the Rajmahal, and they started cutting the trees and the timbers and ploughing the land and started cultivating the rice and cotton. As the lower hills were taken over by Santal settlers, and these Pagarias resided deep into the Rajmahal hill. So these lower hill of Rajmahal were being occupied by Santals, and the deeper were occupied by Pagarias, but here the Pagarias refused to go inside the forest. If Pagarias' life was symbolized by the hoe, you know that, the tool which was used for agriculture, cultivating, ploughing the land, which they used for shifting cultivation, the settler came to represent the power of the plough. The battle between the hoe and the plough was a long one. So here the hoe is symbolized as the life of Pagaria, and here ploughing the land is symbolized the life of settlers who came from outside. So if it is a happen and if it is a met together, then this battle will be led for a long time, right? So I just recall the Pagarias of Rajmahal Hill. You just note on the man map. And so here the Paharias of Rajmahal Hills, their life activities as well as their habits. So here the first one is they practiced shifting cultivation. Note on, Paharias were practicing shifting cultivation, and they collected moho, silk cocoons, raisins, wood for their food from forest. And these people may be the hunters and the shifting cultivators and the food gatherers and the charcoal producers by burning the trees and the silkworm rearers. And they lived, most probably they lived in hutmates of a tamarind grove. You know that what is the tamarind grove? Big trees will be there, and inside the trees there will be a grove. So they used to live, and they rested the shade of mango trees, right? So these are the small recapitulation about the Paharias of Rajmahal Hill, right? Next one is about the rise of Santals. So previously we discussed that when these Paharias did not accept the rules and regulations of this British, and here the Santals took advantage, and they started coming into the forest, and they're clearing the forest and they're cutting down the timbers, and they started doing agricultures like and growing like rice and cotton. So here this is the rise of Santals. How did they enter the forest of Rajmahal, and how did they develop, and how did they take advantage by developing themselves. Here you know that at the end of the 1810, Bashan crashed Ganjuria Pahar, which was a part of Rajmahal ranges, and passed through the rocky and the country beyond, and they reached the village. So here in 1810, here the Bashan entered the village of Ganjuria Pahar, which was one of the parts of Rajmahal ranges, and he passed the rocky and the country beyond, they reached the village, and this village was fully cleared, right? This village was fully cleared, and these lands were extended for the cultivation, and it was a very nice to see the cultivation. And he had mentioned in his account that proper application of human labor, which means here the people, human worked and worked hard and hard for clearing the forest, and finally they made their lands as the cultivation land. And he wrote that Ganjuria is just significantly cultivated to just show the glorious country. Thus this might be made, and I think this is the beauty of the riches might be the equal and almost any in the universe. So here the beauty of the cultivated lands he had seen anywhere in the world. So this was the dialogue was mentioned in his account. So actually this soil was very rocky, but it was uncommonly fine to do agriculture. And finally on the inquiry of the discovered that the frontiers cultivation had been extended by the Santals, they had moved into the areas around 1800, displaced the hill folk who lived in these lower slopes, and cleared the forest and settled the lands, right? So here this is the right time to consolidate the power of the Santals, which means the Paharias were fully losing their power. So they took advantage and started clearing the forest, cutting down the timbers, and they doing agriculture. How did the Santals reach the Rajmahal Hill? So see, these Santals had come into the Bengal almost in the late 1780s. So these zamindars hired them for reclaiming the land for expand cultivation. So they are the higher. Actually, first these zamindars were hired these Santals for reclaiming their land revenue, and also British official invited these Santals to stay in the Jungle Mahal, which is one of the Mahal, and having failed to subdue the Paharias and transform them into settled agriculturists. Yes. So here Paharias did not pay the taxes as we discussed now. So to reclaim the taxes and the transformation and made them to settled agriculturists, here the British officials asked these Santals to stay in jungle Mahals, and these British turned to Santals. Here Paharias refused to cut down the forest, resist the toughing the plan, and continue to be turbulent. So still Paharias did not cooperate with the British officials. So still the people are not clearing the forest, and they are often making a problem with the British officials, right? But here the Santals cleverly consolidating their power, and they started clearing the forest, and their ideal settlers, they were the ideal settlers, and they clearing the forest and the ploughing the land, and they started consolidating their power with the in an ideal manner, right? So these Santals were lands been persuaded settled in the foothills of Rajmahal. Then by 1832, large areas of land was demarcated as the Dominico. So Dominico is a name, right? Dominico is the name given to the part of Rajmahal hill, right? Given to the, I mean, it's a forest name which is given to the hilly areas of Rajmahal hill, and this Dominico is the areas as well as these are all known as the lands of Santals, right? Lands of Santals, and they were live within it, practicing plough of agriculture and become settled peasants. So they were living in the areas under the areas of Dominico, and they started doing under ploughing the agriculture, and they become what? Settled peasants, I mean big peasants. The land grant to the Santals stipulated that was at least 1/10 of the areas was to be cleared and cultivated within the first 10 years. So here the first rules was fixed by the British that within 1/3 of the land should be cleared, and they started their cultivation within first 10 years, right? So they started the cultivation, and the same thing within 10 years they have cleared the forest and they started cultivating the grains. So the territory was surveyed and mapped and enclosed the boundary pillars. It was separated from the both the world. They settled the agriculturists of the plains and the Farias of the hill. So once they cleared the forest, these British officials surveyed the land as well as they drawn the map, and they started fixing the boundary and the pillars for the Santals as well as these Farias. So after the dividing of Dominico, Santal settled expanded rapidly from 40 Santal villages in the area. So in 1838 only there were 40 Santal villages were there, but in the very next 1851 there were 1473 villages. They developed 40 into 1473 villages, right, between the few years. Over the same period, the Santal population increased more than 3,000 to 82,000, and cultivation expanded and increased volume of revenue flowed into the company's official. So when they increased their, villages under their control as well as this population increased, they started doing more and more, expanding their agriculture. So they started giving plenty of revenue to the company. So the company become what? The company become benefiting by the Santals. So here, Santals myths and songs of the 19th century refer very frequently in the history of travel. They represent the Santals past as once continuous mobility, the trailers of the rich, the palace settle. Here the Dominico, their journey seemed to have come to an end. So here, after they consolidating their power, Santals myths and songs in the 19th century refer very frequently in the long history of travel, which means they have framed their own cultures and their own songs, myths and everything. And during the 19th century it was lasting for the it's traveling for the many years, but soon it became end. Dominico, it became the journey of Dominico is going to be end. Why? What is the reason? When the Santals settled on the peripheries of the Rajmahal hill, the Farias resisted but were ultimately forced to withdraw the deeper into the hills, restricted from moving down to the lower hills and valley. They were confined to the dry interior and to the more barren to the rocky upper hills. So here, when Santals were settled in the Rajmahal hills, these Farias resisted. They stopped going inside the forest. In the same way, here these people also restricted to go. Santals were also being restricted to go inside the forest. Instead, they started to move towards the places of a barren and a rocky upper hills. So I think it's very difficult to do agriculture in the places of rocky and the upper hills. So they felt very bad in this situation, and this severely affected their lives and impoverishing them for a long time. Impoverishing is a poverty, nothing but poverty. Okay, so this is the reason why they were suffering lots and lots, which means they were impoverishing, which means impoverishing. They were struggling with the poverty for long terms, right? Then shifting agriculture depended on the ability to move the newer and newer lands, the utilization of the natural fertility of the soil, and when the most fertility soils become inaccessible to them. Yes. So first thing is they are the people who were clearing the forest and started agriculture. So here actually the settled cultivation, right, should need a proper. Shifting cultivation should need a proper land utilization and the natural fertility in soil and everything. But here when they started to move to the places like Rocky and the upper hills, it's very difficult to do, and these lands and the soils become inaccessible to them, and being part of the Jamin, the Pagarias could not effectively sustain their mode of cultivation. So here now Pagarias took the access the places of Dominico. So here they cannot access their the cultivation land as their previous. When the forests of the regions were cleared, the cultivation for the hunters amongst them also faced the problem. So here, after the forests were cleared and they faced many problems. Here Paharias faced many problems, and the Santals, by contrast, gave up their early life of mobility and they settled down, cultivating the range of commercial crops for the market and the dealing with the traders and moneylenders. So here, previously, the Santals cannot cultivate their lands like crops and sell their products. So instead, their yearly life of mobility and settle down, and previously they have commercially cultivating commercial crops, and they were selling in the markets and dealing with the traders and the moneylenders. But these all the things become going to end. So the Santals, however, soon found the land that they had brought under the cultivation was slipping away from their hands. The state was levying the heavy taxes on the land, and the Santals had cleared. So here, finally they found the reason why they had moved away from the land, and why they left their cultivated land is nothing but the reason of levying heavy taxes by the company, right? Levying the heavy taxes by the company were the reason why they were moving to other things. Here, moneylenders were charging them high rates of interest and taking over the lands when the debt remained unpaid, and the zamindars were asserting control over the Jamina area. So when they did not pay the taxes, here moneylenders also lending loans to the poor peasants of Santals with a high cost of interest. So when the crops fail to grow, they cannot settle the payment which they had bought from the moneylender. So finally, these lands will be asserted by the zamindars, and they took over the control of Damin areas. So by 1815, these Santals felt the time had come to rebel against the zamindars, moneylenders, and the colonial state. In order to create an ideal world of themselves, they started where they would rule. So in 1815, these Santals were started war against the zamindars and the moneylenders and the colonial state, which means they are very very angry that these zamindars and the moneylenders as well as the company officials are the reasons why they had left their land. Then it was after the Santal revolt. So Santal revolt had happened between 1855 to 56 that the Santals Pragna was created. Pragna is a committee. Pragna was created and carving out 5,500 square miles from the district of Bagalpur of Bidbam, and the colonial state hoped that creating a new territory of Santals and imposing some special laws within it, these Santals could be consolidated. So after that, after their war, after they took the revolt against the moneylender, zamindars, and British official, finally the British thought that they thought of separating 5,500 square miles for giving the Santals in the city of Bagalpur and Bubam. So by allotting the lands, we could consolidate. Okay, we could consolidate as well as we could make them favorable in their situation, and they will not attack hereafter of British officials and the zamindars and moneylenders, right? So the next one is about the accounts of Bashan. So previously we discussed that Francis Bashan was a physician who came to India for survey of Bengal Medical Academy, camp, as well as he was worked as a surgeon for Governor General Lord Wellesley. So he was not only the physician but also the traveler who had plenty of interest to collect the things as well as the different peoples, their cultures and everything. And here the East India Company assigned some of the works to Bachanan to get from the subcontinent. So here we have been drawing on the Bachanan's account while he was reading his report. We should not forget that he was an employee of the East India Company. So previously we discussed that he was appointed as a physician of physician to survive in Bengal medical camp, right? So that's what we came to know, that he was one of the employee of East India Company, and his journey was not simple but inspired. He was very much love on the landscape as well, landscape of the subcontinent, and he marched everywhere with his army of people, right? I mean, he visited different places in India, along with the peoples like draftmen, surveyors, and planquin barriers and coolies. Why he went along with the draftmen and the surveyors? He wanted to know much about the lands of the India, so that's what he had gone along with the draftsmen and surveyors, right? So the cost of the travel will be borne by the East India Company. Why East India Company want to bear the cost, I mean bear the expense of this travel, is nothing but here East India Company wanted to know some information about the subcontinent, so that here Bashan was expected to collect all the information. So previously East India Company gave their instruction about what are the information he wanted to collect. Everything already they have given, so accordingly he wanted to record everything, right? So when he arrived at the village with his army people, he was immediately perceived to an agent of Sarkar. So whenever he visited to the villages, immediately the people from the village, they thought that he was the agent of Sarkar. Sarkar is that, but you know that government, right? So as the company consolidated its power and expanded its commerce, it looked for the natural resources and could control and exploit. So once the company strongly consolidated their power, both financially and politically, now they wanted to get the benefits of the natural resources in the subcontinent, so that here organized voyages. So here it surveyed the landscape and the revenue sources, and organized voyages for discovery, and sent geologists and geographers and botanists and medical men to collect information. So once they consolidated their power, they wanted to access all the natural resources which has been available in India, so that they form a committee which contains or voyages. Voyages is nothing but the people whoever is discovering place to place. So here they appointed voyagers, along with him geologists, geographers, and the botanists and the medical men and everybody. This group of people, what is their duty is nothing but they wanted to search of the places where the plenty of minerals were available. Here Bashan undoubtedly an extraordinary observer. So whenever Bashan visits any places, he was an extraordinary observer, and wherever he went, he observed everything, like a stone, what type of stone is it, and the rocks and the types of soil and the layers of stones and everything, and he searched for minerals and the stones that were commercially valuable. So especially previously we discussed that East India Company already had assigned some of the instruction to him, that what are the things he had to found. So everything he got as a record, and he recorded all the signs of iron ore and mica and granite and saltpeter. He carefully observed the local practices of salt making and iron ore mining. So these are the things he had keenly observed and recorded in his account. So when Bashan wrote about the landscape, he was most of described not just he saw the places of landscape was like, but also how it could be transformed and made more productive, what crops could be cultivated, which trees cut down, and which ones grown. So initially, whenever he writes about the landscape of the subcontinent, he did not write whatever he had visited, but also he will use to write that which crop is perfect for this particular soil, and which tree is suitable for growing in the soil, and which trees had been cutting off, and everything he wanted to note down in his record. And you must remember that his vision and his priorities were different from those who were the local inhabitants. His assessment of what is necessary and shaped by the commercial concern of the company and modern Western notion of what constituted progress. So his vision of observing the things is totally different from the local inhabitants, that because he commercially noting everything. So since he was an employee of East India Company, so he was commercially noting everything, like apart from his visible. So he had got a collection, he got information from the people in the village, and he noted everything in his record. So he was inevitable inevitably critical of the lifestyle of the forest dwellers and felt that forest had to be turned into agricultural land. So he thought that the forest dwellers were being inevitably critical in their lifestyle. So here for their good lifestyle they wanted to turn into the agricultural lands for their good lifestyle, so that they could get perfect lifestyle in the villages, right?